Hey everybody, good to see you all. Here with Marco. Marco, how you doing?
Good, good, Gene.
Awesome. Alan in Edinburgh is also on the screen, but he may just be asleep right now because it's pretty late there. But anyway, um, feel free to jump in anytime, Marco, with quick questions or clarifications. I'm just going to give a quick overview of what we're going to be discussing Thursday, Pacific time, late morning here in our Zoom room. And it's the focus is on, first and foremost, global warming and how to stop it and reverse it, and then to some degree an expansion and extension of that into all the world's most daunting problems and complete holistic transformation of life on Earth. But first, starting with global warming, a little overview. I'm going to first provide four major topics. One, what I call the great imperative. The next one will be the great missing. What's missing in order for us to achieve the great imperative? A third is what I call the great sand trap. That's the one I'll spend the least amount of time on, but we need to be aware of a sand trap that we need to avoid en route to achieving the great imperative. And fourth and finally, the great strategy and plan for achieving the great imperative. So in that order, first, the great imperative. What is the great imperative? The great imperative is that we not only stop global warming, but reverse it, actually cool the planet. Not just stop it from overheating, but actually cool the planet. And I'm going to start off each of these with kind of like a quote, just to sort of get us on track. It's sort of like a contrarian quote, not a contrarian quote. Anyway, you'll get the hang of it as we go. But in terms of the great imperative of cooling our planet, the quote is this: adaptation is not enough. We must stop and then reverse planetary overheating. And I kind of, I sort of, anyway, what I'm doing is I'm kind of taking an opposite position, a contrarian position, that we have to cool the planet, and making it clear that no, that's not enough. And in terms of any of the other possible opposites, another possible opposite is no, we shouldn't be messing with the planet anymore. If humans need to go extinct, let them go extinct. No, human extinction is not enough. If we want to save life on Earth, minus humans, the humans paradoxically need to be here in order to orchestrate that, because we need to safely shut down and entomb nuclear, for example. Because if we just disappear with civilizational collapse and our inability to grow our own food, other life forms will persist for a while, but you've got 440 nuclear power plants that could all go Fukushima. But the bottom line is that we have this great imperative to cool the planet. We have to do it. We have the technology, we have the tools, and short of, God or creator or spirit or whatever concept you have of a higher power coming down and doing it for us, which I'm totally open to, by the way, bring it, spirit, bring it, creator, if you will. I mean, I'd love it if you would, but short of that, I'm kind of going on the precautionary principle that we have to work with what we've got to do our part, and we actually have the technology to cool the planet. So let's do it.
And I'll jump in.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
And say, it's I have a belief in a creator and certainly a more powerful beings than ourselves. But I think very often, just like we empower our children, we need to be empowered to take care of things ourselves. You take care of your children for so much time, and then you hope they will do the rest of the job on their own. And I think that's where we're at planetarily as a species, that we've made a mess, let's clean it up.
Absolutely, Marco. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, we'll keep jumping in because I love your when you do. Same to you, Alan, if you ever happen to tune in, or anyone else for that matter. This is an open room, open forum. So from the great imperative that we must not only stop, but reverse planetary overheating, that brings us to the great missing. Well, what is missing from what is keeping us from doing that? And I'll start with the next quote that addresses kind of a different bookend perspective. And here's the quote: emission reduction is not enough. We need a complete set of solutions spanning, and there are fundamentally three areas, and I break it down into three that seem pretty natural. One is greenhouse gas management. That is the stuff of emissions and sequestration, et cetera, through whatever means. The second of the three is aerosol management. Now, part of aerosol management shows up with emissions management, because when we emit, we don't just emit gases, we emit particulates. Think a low-tech coal-burning power plant of the kind that powers most of the planet in terms of electric power generation. We are emitting aerosols which cause global dimming, the aerosol masking effect, call it what you will. That is a form of SRM, solar radiation management, however unintentional. But when I say aerosol management, I don't just mean this heretofore unintentional emission of aerosols, but we could also include stratospheric aerosol injection. Basically, aerosols are among the cheapest and easiest and lowest tech means that we have of creating some planetary shading, some aerosol masking that has the precise opposite effect of the greenhouse gases in terms of storing heat. The greenhouse gases retain heat, the aerosols reflect heat away, reflect sunlight back into space, which again is a form of SRM, solar radiation management. The third category of solutions is myriad other than aerosols, myriad other forms of planetary albedo management, albedo being the reflectivity of the planet. So ways of achieving, and that's also SRM, but it's SRM separate from aerosol management. And top of the list in my mind, three big solutions come to mind: mirrors, marine cloud brightening, and what was formerly called ICE 911, which is the sprinkling of a thin layer of silica powder over certain regions of the world, mainly snow and ice regions of the world, to make them brighter. Marine cloud brightening, if you haven't heard of that, you really need to, because it appears to be the most, by far the most cost-effective and actually least intrusive form of SRM. And it could very likely take us all the way in terms of cooling the planet completely with, completely in the sense of to the extent that we want to, that we need to. And the other major bucket of this third category is mirrors. Mirrors on land, mirrors in the oceans, mirrors on rooftops, vast arrays of floating mirrors in the oceans, any other basically kind of mirror. So that's the great missing. What is missing is a holistic set of solutions, right? Where most of humanity's attention right now as regards global warming in terms of solutions is on emissions reduction, which is a very important piece of the pie long-term, but short-term, it actually has the opposite effect of what we seek, insofar as most emissions reduction programs focus first and foremost on the dirtiest emissions, the one that emit the most soot and other forms of aerosols, along with greenhouse gases. And it is precisely those aerosols that are keeping us alive right now with the aerosol masking effect, keeping us cooler to the tune of about 1 degree centigrade relative to where we would be if we didn't have those aerosols. So anyway, the great missing is, it is great, and it is very much missing from the global discussion. And we have the technology. I mean, literally, with a number, with a dollar figure that numbers in the billions, not even tens of billions necessarily, you know, maybe 10, 20 billion at the most, but it could be done for as little as maybe 5 to 8 billion based on current estimates, which are pretty good. We could cool the planet actually with marine cloud brightening, for example. So none of these are beyond our reach. We just need to collectively get our act together and do this. All right, so brief recap. We've got the great imperative, cool the planet, the great missing, a complete set of solutions spanning the 3 areas I mentioned: greenhouse gas management, aerosol management, and third, myriad other forms of planetary albedo management, or SRM, solar radiation management. And what is left to cover are first the great sand trap, and then finally the great strategy and plan. What is the great sand trap? So the great sand trap goes like this. So as I mentioned, we've figured out, we have the technology for all of these solutions without exception. We have the technology. And so, you know, what's the holdup? I think the holdup is the great sand trap. And the great sand trap, I'm going to describe it as follows. The great sand trap goes like this. Somebody figures out one of these solutions, and instead of bringing these solutions to a larger forum, right, and saying, hey, I've got the solution, let's talk about it. And, you know, part of the great missing is precisely that forum, this forum for solar radiation management that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, and which we're now going to focus intensively on. Rather than do that, most of these different solutions and the groups that support them, to my knowledge, are going straight to the neoliberal capitalist model of, I need to raise money for my solution, right? That's the great sand trap. And the net effect that it's having is it's keeping these solutions separate from each other. The forum seeks to counter that trend. Anyway, I promised to spend the least amount of time on the great sand trap, so I'll just leave it at that. Basically, we are all of us to varying degrees, and most of us to a huge degree, trapped in the capitalist system, the all-day monopoly game, individual hoarding for individual aggrandizement, and that's infected academia, nonprofit sector, private sector, government sector, you name it. So we're extremely fragmented as a society. The forum on cooling the planet primarily through SRM, the different forms of SRM. But remember, I promised that we'd talk about expanding from cooling the planet to addressing the other planetary problems that we have. The ultimate forum that we need is really a planetary collective intelligence addressing all our problems and all the solutions that we need, not just the complete set of solutions I mentioned in the realm of the great missing, with the 3 categories I mentioned therein. So what is the great, now on to the 4th of the 4 topics, the great strategy and plan. And again, I'm going to start off with a quote that's sort of the opposite of what we need to be focused on. And it goes like this. Here's the quote. a near infinitesimal fraction of humanity getting it, getting it as regards to everything we've just talked about. And in terms of the complete set of solutions and its three major subcategories for global warming, a near infinitesimal fraction of humanity getting it, and then us dividing up that already near infinitesimal fraction of humanity into even tinier groups, right? Each focused on trying to fund and develop their own tiny projects as the solution. That's not enough. We need a different strategy than applying the capitalist, global neoliberal separation and hoarding strategy to these problems and their solutions. The great strategy and plan that I propose, that we propose, because a bunch of us have been pushing for this, begins with those of us who get it, who get what, who get all of it, all that we've been discussing on this recording thus far, and will continue to cover. All of us both getting it and coming together as a collective intelligence and as a seed crystal for a collective movement and organization to, first of all, complete this big picture, everything we're talking about here, and complete the picture, complete the story, right? Make it communicable. Perfecting our shared understanding of our great imperative to stopping and reversing planetary overheating. And how that in turn fits within an even larger shared understanding of our much larger set of great imperatives. Right? See, global warming didn't just happen in a vacuum. It's not like we're here living on, in the Garden of Eden, everyone just loving each other and loving all creatures, great and small. And then all of a sudden this asteroid of overheating came upon us. Oh, no. This is a byproduct, a consequence of a bunch of root problems, such as the syndrome of individual hoarding for individual aggrandizement, a fundamentally omnicidal mode of production of the global economy, extremely broken politics with tribalism, racism, nationalism, totalitarianism, fascism, all the stuff that's running rampant today. So we have a whole set of great imperatives beyond the one of cooling the planet. So we're going to be talking about all that and perfecting our overall great strategy and plan. But the first step, right, there's that Chinese saying that 1,000-mile journey begins with the first step. The first step is for the global warming folks who really get it, who get the full spectrum of the solutions that we need, the complete set of solutions that I discussed a few minutes ago within the context of the great missing. Those of us who get it, and including all of those of us who are working on specific solutions like marine cloud brightening, like mirror reflection, like ICE 9/11, the first step is for all of us to come together and not only, begin a journey towards a collective movement and organization to cool the planet using this holistic set of solutions, but also set an example for how one particular community came together, overcame the great sand trap, and came together as a collective to address this one great imperative. Other great imperatives can learn from our example, not necessarily copy it, because they'll probably have very different dynamics, or very different problems, very different solutions, et cetera. But at a minimum, learn from our example and figure out their own strategy towards addressing their own great imperatives. And then all these different communities coming together, bringing their respective collective intelligences together into one big uber collective intelligence and one big uber collective movement, and dare I say organization or network of organizations, to put it all together. But you see, global warming is a very special and central part of all this, because global warming will wipe us all out very soon, in a matter of years, a few years, far less than a decade, if we don't tame this beast and cool the planet. Anyway, with that, I will pass the talking feather. I need to get rolling myself fairly soon, but any comments or questions before we wrap?
Yeah, I think, there's still a portion of the population that thinks there's some kind of hunker down and ride it out situation going to happen, and I just don't understand how anyone thinks that allowing the planet to continue to overheat at the rate it's at, thinning the population down to a very few that are hiding in any kind of shelter, that how they think that, in a reasonable amount of time they'll be able to come out and find paradise. It's really pretty crazy. It took us a few years to get to this situation, about 100, and that's easily a couple generations. So I don't know where that kind of thinking gets anyone. I think it's simply, we've made a mess. We have plenty of proof of it. Let's just get together and clean it up. It just, to me, that's that simple. And there's a little bit of technical things to do, and with marine cloud brightening kind of topping my list right now, or the top two, the dusting of the ice fields with reflective silica, and marine cloud brightening, followed by the MIR project. They sound like the top three to me. And if you don't know about them, you need to show up here for the meetings. We'll inform you. And I think that's all I have to say.
Beautiful. Thank you, Marco. Yeah, in response to your comment there at the beginning, that it blows you away that some people think that they can kind of hunker down and ride this out, like, from a bunker or something like that. The thing is, we have not been trained or developed or learned how to think in planetary terms as a collective, as one humanity, right? We have been trained and developed to think in hyper individualistic terms, right? So most people just don't even have a clue about how to think in planetary terms, right? And that's a reality that we have to contend with. And that is part of our challenge and part of the great strategy and plan, both around global warming and around the larger set of great imperatives. I happen to think global warming is the most urgent, the most critical, the most obvious, the one that we just absolutely have to get right on top of right now. And part of that great strategy and plan will include this collective intelligence, this community and movement and organization to figure out how to bring this to the world and say, hello world, we, this is a great imperative. And, to make a kind of a weak parallel, or maybe not so weak, when the Americans back in the early 60s says, hey, let's, led by John F. Kennedy at the time, let's, put people on the moon and bring them home safely. At first, that was just some crackpot idea that hardly anyone had ever conceived of, right? That was probably on the order of how crazy it seems that we can cool the planet with reflectivity, right? It's one of those. It turned out it was absolutely correct, but at the time when the idea was first floated, it was probably seen as kind of a crackpot sci-fi fantasy idea. So be it, right? Well, by the end of the decade, it was a reality on every television screen. And as Umair Haque recently wrote, for a brief moment, all of humanity was united, rooting on these brave astronauts and glued to their television screens, watching and waiting and seeing, what would happen, right? But so the world was brought together by something that started off as a crazy sci-fi fantasy idea. So we need to essentially create, the open source planetary equivalent of a NASA, but for addressing the great imperative of cooling the planet. So that's it from my end for now. And Marco, I'll give you the last words before we end the recording.
Thank you. I picked up on something you just said about we've been trained not to be able to think globally. And I hadn't thought about it that way really until now, although I have a belief that major education systems have in the past 100 years been made to have people, be good workers rather than big thinkers. But this has been a conversation that's been ongoing a little bit here in the meetings I've been having, that people just aren't capable of big picture thinking. They can only see, you worry about your family, you worry about yourself, then your family, then some friends, and then maybe your community and your city. Much beyond that, people don't have the capacity, or don't seem to have the capacity to think of ideas or consequences of global solutions or problems. And maybe what you said is more correct than the way I've been thinking, that we're not capable, but we've been trained not to be able to do that. So interesting topic to be explored once we've solved the global warming, so that we can continue to exist, to have thoughts. And we need to get on to that. Thank you. This is what we have to do.
Yeah. I happen to think that the retraining will go hand in hand, as we've been discussing. So I think all these transformations really will happen in parallel. And I know from deep discussions with you that you agree with me. So anyway, and thank you so much for doing your part, Marco. You are a tremendous leader and inspiration here with the collective intelligence and all that we're doing together. So much love, much gratitude. And thank you all for watching. Marco, the last words.
We need to pull together for our common benefit with love in our hearts. That I'm complete.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Marco. And thank you all for watching. All right, we'll see you right here in our Zoom room Thursday, starting at, I think we'll probably start at around 9:30 Pacific time tomorrow. And then, of course, we have Friday, the 24-hour block party, starting at 7 a.m. Pacific time. So join us for either or preferably both of those days. We'll see you soon. Thanks so much. Much love. Have a great night. See ya.